continuing our special editions of basketball previews. We've got Creighton men's basketball head coach Greg McDermott on tonight. And we're going to break down the 2021, 22. These years have flown by, man. I swear. It was 2012 when I first started doing this.
Yesterday. It was. Yeah. Yesterday it was.
Seriously, it's craziness. Mac's probably way sick of me by now. And Scurry wasn't even a Blue Jay yet. So,
man, I remember listening to you my freshman year, and now I get to be on it with you.
That's
it's
right.
An honor.
The pleasure is mine, sir. Yeah, Mac, we appreciate you coming on to take out time out of your night. You got a game tomorrow, so I mean, your hours are precious. So
let's go.
We appreciate you.
Well, the good news for you guys is I don't have any film on Arkansas Pine Bluff, so it's not like I've got any more I can do. So I'm actually going to start a little film on Kennesaw State tonight, so we'll roll with that. But
nice, yeah. I think
you're talking about 2012. This is my 33rd year starting tomorrow. Like I think Scurry was 9 years from being born when I started, if my math's correct. So I've been at this a little bit too long.
That's kind of what I did want to ask you about that, and I figure you just gave me the perfect opportunity. But so much of what you've wanted to do as a head coach in terms of your goals of as a Creighton head coach was getting Creighton to that next level, right? So much was made of the fact that they hadn't done that in kind of the modern era. And then you win the Big East regular season title, you get the 1 seed 2 seasons ago, you get the Sweet 16 last year, which hadn't been done since the 70s. What's motivating you now after you've crossed off, you checked those boxes and there were such huge boxes for Creighton Nation? Like what's up? What's going? What keeps you going now?
Well, when we first started talking about this, Matt, we were in the Valley, and we're trying to just elevate and be a national player at the mid-major level at that time. I mean, thinking we're going to be in the Big East was farthest from any of our minds at that point in 2012. I mean, I didn't think any of us thought that was a possibility. And Scurry will tell you, he played for me. It's, I've always been I'm not a crazy goal setter, but I really felt like if we could make a Sweet 16 at some point, that the story of Creighton would get told and everybody would know what a special situation we had here. Now, moving to the Big East and that first team being as successful as it was kind of told the story. I think everybody found out, anybody who didn't know about Creighton that year found out, and the team was successful. Doug had a terrific year. We had a once in a lifetime game against Villanova where he opened the game with 9-3. So there was a lot of attention in our program, and I think people figured out what we were all about. So with this young group, it's just been, let's get better, guys. Like, we got to get better today. And, we're going to make some mistakes, and we got to be able to play through those mistakes and try to get our heads back in the game as quickly as possible. And, that's usually you're dealing with 1, 2, 3 guys that maybe are part of the rotation as freshmen. And now we're dealing with, the 5 new guys plus Rati and Mo, who essentially are freshmen as well because they didn't play last year. So really you could stop every play if you wanted to. And we as a staff have just had to let them play through some things and see if we can improve as a result.
Yeah, is this the youngest team you think you've ever had? Like, have you thought about that at all? If I would compare?
Yeah, no question.
They're like an AAU team to me.
Yeah.
That's why I'm looking at it.
My guess is there's some, Scurry knows this growing up on the East Coast. There's probably a few of those prep school teams, those post-grad teams out on the East Coast that have their average age is probably higher than ours. So, this group has come to work every day. They've been awesome to coach, a lot of fun to coach. And, I think that in itself is re-energized me because you last year, you're there and you're practicing and you're teaching, but are you really teaching, or are these guys just listening to you because it's part of the process?
Yeah.
Like, you have to teach this year, and, we have to be engaged. And, last year, I think maybe myself or one of the assistants could have an off day in practice and we'd still accomplish something. This year, we've got to be on point because we have so many young guys that are looking to us for direction.
Scurry and I talked about this, I think, after it might have been right after you guys beat Ohio, but it was one of the podcasts after that where And it wasn't like to take away anything that you guys had done, but it just felt like this making the Sweet 16 didn't have the kind of attention it deserved, because the players didn't get to come back to the airport and go to campus and kind of like soak in what that moment is. You know, there was so much isolation that it was almost like a business trip. Does that motivate you to get back to that so the players can experience that a little bit?
Yeah. And I always feel a void for last year's team. And the year before the year before that, while we're talking about it, I mean, that team won a Big East championship. It was going to be a 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. And, that was a team that really needed to be celebrated because they had an incredible year. And, not only did we not celebrate it, everybody went their own way, that day when they canceled the tournament, and we never got together ever again. So that was difficult. And then last year's team, and Scurry remembers what it was like, Big East tournament, when you come back to the hotel after a big win. I mean, the place is jumping. You go to the next game and the lobby is packed shoulder to shoulder as you're walking to the bus. I mean, those are things that I'm sure Jordan will tell you don't ever forget. And as good a team as we had last year, we didn't get to experience any of that. And to your point, going back to the hotel after you win an NCAA tournament bid or game and celebrating with your fans and the guys celebrating with their families, that's part of the experience. And not only did we not get that, but to your point, when you make a Sweet 16, you come back to campus for 4 days. And just think what that would be like on our campus and in our community. It would have been incredible for our guys. And I always feel bad that they didn't get to experience that. But I hope people understand what a special group that was.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, because I've talked about that many times. Like, even when it all went down last year during the NCAA tournament, I felt even so bad from my relationships, with all the guys that I had known from the team just for my senior year. So for them not to have that Omaha experience, I'm glad. Like, we tried to highlight it on this podcast a little bit, because we know how much the Omaha community means to our teams and like how much it meant to me just in my years there. So yeah, no, I'm glad we were able to talk about that, but that's what excites me more about this year and having fans back. Like, so I'm so excited for you guys to have it and have that, because for something that meant so much to me, I'm glad you guys are starting to get it back and starting to get that, like, because that is so much of the essence of, I feel like, what Creighton is now, like that, that interaction with the community and knowing those people who are at those games. And so it's what makes me excited now, like in my position, like seeing you guys play, and with this young team, I'm excited to see you guys roll it all out there tomorrow.
Yeah, we can't, it was fun, just the exhibition game, Jordan, to have some people in the crowd. And, like today, there was a family, they had twins that were celebrating, I believe, their 5th birthday. And, there was like 6 kids and a couple, their parents were at practice. And we haven't had much of that for a year and a half, and as we had people rolling through there all the time, because to your point, I think we have a responsibility. Omaha does a lot for us. They've supported us, and our community's just been terrific to us. And I just feel like that's our way of giving back. If somebody can bring their twins by for their birthday and we can go over and high five those kids, the guys can, and sing them happy birthday. I mean, that's a lifelong memory for those kids. And I think we have an obligation to do that. And, I really enjoy it. And I think our guys enjoy it.
Let's jump into the team here and kind of learn about these guys a little bit. And honestly, this whole analysis that we have here tonight, it might change in 2 months. That's just kind of the nature of a young group, right? But I wanted to start with the walk-ons, because this is a walk-on friendly podcast, right? We respect the walk-ons. The first thing I wanted to ask you before I ask you about these guys individually is just the type of people you've had in those positions over the years. Do you look for a certain type of personality? Because it's such like and this is the media's fault, honestly. Like, it's a thankless position. Like, you don't get the limelight, but you have to do a lot of work. You have to show up early to practice. You have to know the scout better than anybody. You have to get your guys prepared for the game. There's so much that goes into building the culture that starts with those walk-ons, that like it just doesn't get the limelight for it. But like, do you look for a certain type of personality to fill those roles?
Absolutely. And first of all, Scur, I saw you smile when I was drinking this. This is water, not vodka. I could see the look on your face.
Sam,
So,
don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. It's a Monday.
Yeah.
If we did this on a Friday, maybe, but it's a
Maybe
Monday.
in trouble. Yeah. No, Matt, that's a great question. And you want to make sure that your walk-ons, and first of all, Jordan won the walk-on every year. He earned a scholarship one of the years and was very deserving of that. And I'll never forget when we broke that news to him. That was a pretty cool moment, not just for him, but for all of his teammates and for all of us as well. But you want people that are going to enhance your culture, and different players have different skill sets to do that. Obviously, Jordan was able to really do it with his voice. He was a very positive influence in the locker room. He was very positive influence in practice on a daily basis. And, he played a little bit with Tyler Clement, who, just lived the game. And he could look at a sheet of paper once with 8 plays and he had it in 1 minute and was able to not only correct his teammates, but sometimes correct his coaches on where people were supposed to be. So, we've been very particular with who we've added, and Jordan was someone that Steve Lutz had watched in high school and was aware of what he was capable of. We watched Tyler Clement, we watched Jet Canfield, we watched Sammy Osmani, we watched Xander, who's with us now. Devin Davis kind of fell in our lap, and he's ended up being a really, really good player for us. And, in practice today, he's playing the, Arkansas Pine Bluff's best guy. And he just did a terrific job. And, Jordan will remember this. And I've said it many times in practice. Matter of fact, I said it today. And I went over to Coach Huss and said, I'm not sure that this group isn't running this stuff better than Pine Bluff will run it tomorrow night. And, doing the defensive things that we need to have done and the physicality with which we wanted them to do it. So it's a very important part of our program. And, and those guys are, walk on to me is just, you have to say it, but I hope that Jordan never felt like a walk on. And we try to treat Devin and Sammy and Xander like there's no difference. They get everything that everybody else gets. They get treated the same. And, even this year with the NIL situation, the event that we had, those guys were able to get some money as well because the guys wanted a team approach to it. And those guys are a very, very important part of our team.
Jordan never acted like a walk-on. That's for damn sure. I couldn't tell walking in the gym.
No, that's why I'm glad you brought it up though, and I'm glad you highlighted guys like TC and just other guys, even like Mo, Guinea, there's a lot of guys, who just, I think as a walk-on, and what's great about the role that it has at Creighton is it's such a unique position in all respects, like whether it's me, TC, or whoever, like we all found our lane, I think, where you provide value to the team. And I think seeing the guys now, that's why we wanted to ask about it, because you see the role that they're able to play, and like you saying like their demonstration of how they've been able to, play better than who you're playing is something I definitely can relate to. And it's just like where you can see the role at Creighton, it means a lot to guys, and you can see it with these guys. So glad to see that they're finding their way and providing that value.
Matt, he didn't look like a walk-on very often, but I hate to do this to Jordan, but there was about a 2-day period where I've never seen it in 33 years of coaching, but he got the yips from the free throw line.
I remember.
You were there. Remember, he literally shot the ball, a 15-foot shot, like 10 feet. And he had I'll never forget the look on your face. Jordan, you had this look like, what in the heck just happened? So we flipped it back to him and he did it again. He was shaking his head and trying to get the cobwebs out of his head. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen for someone that was as good a shooter as Jordan. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden it just left him and he didn't know what happened.
I remember that.
It was like Space Jam. Like they came with like your basketball powers.
Man, that was the one, because it was right before the Australia trip. So I don't know if it was something about me getting the yips for that, but yeah, to this day, I don't remember. I've told the story on the podcast. I think I stayed after practice for like an hour to try to figure it out.
You ripped your shirt off and went and shot on the gun on like the far court, like all by yourself. You're like, get away from everybody. I'll deal with this. I'll handle this. That was hilarious. Yeah. let's we wanted to group this by positions this year, just because there's so many new faces on this team. We could talk about them for 2 hours. But starting with your point guards, like I know Reef's been, in and out of practice a lot this preseason, especially with the offseason surgery he had and everything. But you kind of know what he's gonna bring to the table. How does he pair with Ryan Nembhard, and what was that like when you did get to see them in practice together? What were those reps like for those two?
Well, when they were out there together, it was really fast. I was watching film one night when I had them on the same team, and they were out there for a stretch together, and it was like a video game. I mean, they were flying up and down, and it really forces the three guys on the floor with him, like, you better run, because these dudes are just flying it at an incredible pace. Sharif finally had a practice jersey on again today.
Nice.
For the first time in a while. I joke with him. I said, I see your picture on a bus going around town. I see it on a bench, on a corner, but I haven't seen you in a practice jersey for so long. I forgot what it looked like. So he was back and, did some drills today. He's done a really good job of leading from the sideline. And I've been proud of him because it would be easy for him to really be down in the dumps because he missed a good portion of the summer with the foot injury and was in a boot cast and a boot and everything that goes with recovering from that injury. And then he comes out of that. And then, we have this issue. So, rather than sitting on the side and moping, he's been involved in the huddles and talking to the guys before and after practice, and just really proud of him. And, Reef played his best basketball as a Blue Jay at the end of last season. We played he and Marcus together a fair amount. And I think we could play him and Ryan together some, or R2, I'll call him, because if I say Ryan, you're not going to know which Ryan I'm talking about. But he, he's going to be really good. He was shooting the ball well, and obviously defensively, he's elite. And his leadership, I think he's really embraced that role, and we're going to need him to, frankly.
And then Ryan Nembhard, it seems like he's prototypical for what you guys like to do, right? But he is a true freshman. There's going to be growing pains, right? How has he navigated that so far?
I mean, it's been amazing, really, Matt. He's I don't know that if I've had I know I haven't. I mean, as I think back, Doug's adjustment from high school to college, those first 3 or 4 weeks of practice, that wasn't as smooth as what Ryan's has been. And it might be Doug, Ryan has played on an international stage for, the better part of the last 2 or 3 years. He was playing against pros when he was at Mount Verde, when he was a sophomore and junior, and the guys he had to guard and practice every day while he was waiting his turn to lead his team to a national championship. He's played with elite players, and nothing really bothers him. And it's been fun to see. And I said this the other day to someone, there's a lot of teams that when Sharif's in the game, they don't bring the ball up against Sharif. They just pass the ball to somebody else and let somebody else bring it because they want to deal with that pressure. Yeah. In about a week or 7, 8, 9 days into practice, I said to my staff, I said, I just thought of something. Like, Sharif has been practicing against R2, and not one time did I notice that R2 felt uncomfortable. And Sharif makes everybody feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, I've been really pleased with his progress. He's got to become more vocal, which he will. But he's leading by example when he addresses his teammates, and it's in a positive way. He's got a lot of it, and Scurry will remember this. He's got a lot of Maurice Watson in him. He really does. He plays with pace. You can throw different coverages at him, and he's going to pick it apart. And I just remember when Maurice was redshirted, our ball screen coverage, it didn't matter what we did. When you commit 2 guys to the ball, somebody's open, and Maurice always found who was open, always. And R2 is very similar to that. Probably shoots it a little better than Maurice did when he first got here. By the end, Maurice was shooting it pretty well. So, he's going to be fun to watch. Our fans are really going to enjoy him. And I know I've really enjoyed coaching him up to this point.
I think so. With the next 2 guys, I think so. At that guard position, I think kind of the way we want to break this down, really looking at, I guess, with Sharif being out or having that injury, is it the hip or the groin, Mac?
It's more the groin, and it's just, it's one those are situations where it just takes time to heal. You just if you do any type of basketball movement, it's going to irritate it, especially the way he plays. So he'll I'm hopeful that we can ease him back into practice over the course of the next week. And is there an outside chance of maybe Nebraska or the Virgin Islands potentially? But things would have to go pretty well, I think, for that to happen. And up to that point, Scur, we'll use Rati as a backup at that position. He's learning as well, even though he was here for a little bit last year before he got hurt. But he totally different look than what R2 does. But like Ryan, Rati's really got great court vision.
Yeah, because that was the one I wanted to ask about, because I heard you say some stuff about him playing that position. So glad to hear he can step into that role, I think, for the time being. And then the other one I did want to ask about was because Matt and I have been talking about how this team looks defensively a lot. And I know Trey Alexander, very talented offensive player. How's he looked like defensively, and just like, where do you see him in rotations? What is he able to guard, like position wise, like 1 through what does it look like for him?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a strange situation, because you could argue that Ryan Hawkins and Arthur are the same position, but they're both too talented to just play each one of them 20 minutes and have them split time. So how do the only way to do that is you got to get them on the floor together some, so that they have the minutes that they deserve and they've earned. Had I chosen to go the other way and just leave them at that position, then Trey would be a starter. Because he's played that well. He's shot it well in practice. His assisted turnover is really good. He's not there yet, but I've seen signs of him having the potential to be an elite defender. I think he can be a Kyrie type defender down the road. He's got a great understanding. His dad's a coach, and you can tell that he's played, that he's been around basketball his whole life, and he's a coach's kid. But he's going to be a really, really good player for us. And I don't know that there's anything he's elite at right now. I think we're going to work towards that. But there's also not a glaring weakness in his game, which for freshmen, that's very atypical. He'll be a key rotation player for us from day one.
While we're on your wings, kind of like the one guy on this roster who has a ton of kind of high level D1 experience that you can kind of lean on is Alex O'Connell. And I'm curious, how has that translated so far into a leadership role? Because whether it's there from a comfort standpoint with just something he does naturally, it's got to be kind of there by default, doesn't it? Because of his experience.
Yeah. And, he hasn't had the type of experience that he's going to have this year. He's always been in a secondary role. And, now all of a sudden the role has changed, and he's in a huge leadership role. And, we're going to need him to be extremely consistent, and probably almost unrealistically consistent, given his experience. He was thrown into an impossible situation last year where, you're lifting 4 days a week with Jeremy, you're getting shots up, you're getting extra workouts in outside of practice. You're not really held accountable to know any of the offensive sets because you're redshirt, you're sitting out. And then all of a sudden we approach him and say, well, tomorrow you're eligible. So, that's a tough hat to wear all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. And he did a really good job with it, and, provided some really good minutes for us off the bench. But his leadership has been great, especially the last 2 or 3 weeks. He played very well against Missouri. He played very well against Upper Iowa, very efficient. And then defensively, we're asking him to wear another hat too. He's going to have to guard one of the other team's better players, and he's got to be able to embrace that. And I'm hopeful for kind of a metamorphosis similar to Tyshawn. Tyshawn, as Scur knows, Tyshawn wasn't exactly a go-to defender his first couple of years, and then we just kind of said, "You're it. We don't have anybody else can do it. So we want you to embrace this." And to Ty's credit, he did that and became one of the best defensive guards in the Big East that season. Mm-hmm. So I'm hopeful that Alex can follow that same path.
Yeah, the interesting thing with Alex, I mean, the St. John's performance at home when you guys were short, Marcus stands out because he shot the ball really well. But the one that I remember a lot is the Big East tournament game against UConn and his rebounding. What type of value does that provide, knowing that you've got a guard / wing that can rebound the ball like he can?
Do you remember how bad we were rebounding last year, Matt?
Yeah.
So, last year's team had just so many strengths, but rebounding the basketball was not one of them. We just, and for the reason that you mentioned, like really, if you think about last year's team, Christian all the time was tied up in a blackout. So he was in a wrestling match every time the shot went up. And usually it's your wings that can fly in and, make a play on the ball. But Denzel wasn't a great vertical athlete. Mitch wasn't a great vertical athlete. Marcus wasn't a great vertical athlete. Right. DJ was really kind of the only guy that could do it. And he got some rebounds out of his area that were pretty incredible. Alex is an elite rebounder for a guard. He's an elite cutter for a guard. And I think just having him on the floor is going to provide a lot of help on both the defensive glass and the offensive glass. And, we'll talk about Arthur in a little bit, but Arthur's an elite rebounder. So, we've spent a lot of time on rebounding, more than I have, for sure in the last 4 or 5 years up until the first game. Rebounding is kind of one of those things you start to stink. So you make sure you get some drills a couple days in a row. I mean, we've pretty much drilled it every single day. And Scur remembers some of those drills. They're not the most fun drills in the world. But he's a great rebounder for a guard and is really going to help us in that regard.
Yeah, there's a reason you guys take a water break before you put the plug in. There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
The plug. Do I remember the plug?
You never want to see that plug, do you?
Oh, that was always the fun one.
Jordan, you want to ask about Arthur?
Yeah, no. So, yeah, that's a thing. That's a fun one because I think you just highlighted it too very well with that. I think even rebounding specifically with Arthur and Ryan, I think is unique. And I do have to highlight, I did hear you said on Nick's podcast, those two guys had really shown you something in practice. And just earned like the ability to play on the floor together. What specifically, are you seeing something specifically from the two of them on the floor together? Or is it something just like you can see it rotationally, those two guys really being able to provide that role of rebounding in both shooting, wherever it is, just kind of touch on that.
Well, Jordan, as you're going to see, there's some negatives to having them on the floor together,
Okay.
Because, Ryan Hawkins he not only didn't play power forward at Northwest Missouri, he played center. So, he's moving to the 3. I just felt like, and Scurry, this, there's not a lot of difference in our system between 2 and 3, but there is a lot of difference between 3 and 4. And I didn't want to put that on Arthur the first year to having to learn both. So I asked Hawk to do it. And, Hawk's figuring out kind of how to defend out there, the position and the angles he needs to take to survive. He technique wise and fundamentally as a rebounder, he's really, really good. But the bottom line is if you don't figure out a way to get them on the floor together, they're both going to get around 20 minutes, and that's not enough. They've proven in practice with their consistent play that they need to be on the floor 25 minutes plus for us, I think, to have our best chance to be successful. So that's why I decided to start them both because, frankly, they both earned it. It's that we can play a lot different. You move Hawk to the 4 if Arthur's out or vice versa, and you bring in Trey and you bring in another ball handler. You bring in Rati, you bring in another ball handler, or when Sharif's healthy, you bring in another ball handler there, or you bring a guy like Christopoulos off the bench who can really shoot it. So, we've got a lot of options, but I have to figure out a way to get those guys some minutes.
Before we move on to the bigs a little bit, I wanted to ask you about John Christopoulos and Mason Miller. Again, with these freshmen, you're going to have like a lot of head spinning moments. And I'm wondering how those two have navigated through that as they try to find, where, like Jordan talked about earlier, finding a lane to provide value on this current roster. How have John and Mason handled that so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's been up and down, and those two have had some really good times, and they've had some times when they've struggled for different reasons. And our system offensively, while we play with a lot of freedom, we do have some set plays that we want to take advantage of put guys in certain situations and create the mismatch or the look that we want out of that action. So you have to learn a lot there. And then, as Jordan will tell you too, why we play with a lot of freedom offensively. Defensively, the scouting report is pretty detailed. We may guard one guy in a ball screen one way and the other guards on the floor we guard a totally different way. So you have to remember a lot on the fly when you're playing 100 miles an hour, and every freshman adjusts differently to that. You guys will be the first to know. I give you the scoops all the time, Matt. Mason Miller's going to redshirt.
Okay.
I've had a good talk with his dad 2 or 3 days ago, and then a subsequent conversation with Mason. And Mason's he's not going to be good. He's going to be great. But he reminds me a little bit of Justin Patton in that Justin wasn't ready to play as a freshman, and almost every reason he wasn't ready is because he wasn't strong enough. And as soon as he got stronger, like we saw the results. The difference between Justin Patton as a freshman and Justin Patton as a sophomore were totally two different human beings in terms of their ability to play. And I think Mason can make a similar jump. I think if we can add 10 or 15 pounds of muscle to that frame, his ability to play through contact. He shot the ball extremely well. He shot it as good as anybody on our team. But just the things he's going to need defensively and to survive on the glass, and then to finish through contact when he gets in the paint. I think a year with Jeremy Anderson will be huge for him. So I'm excited about that. And I think, frankly, I think Mason is, and I know Mike was really on board with it when we had the discussion. So we've got a plan for him, both in the weight room and from a nutrition standpoint and outside of practice time, that we'll execute to make sure that he takes full advantage of this year. And, John hasn't shot the ball in practice as well as I know he's capable of shooting it. And I just think it's going to be one of those things when it clicks, it's going to click, and it's going to be it's going to be a landslide. It's going to all happen at once. And because he's too good of a shooter to not be shooting 40+% in practice. But he's works extremely hard, and he's picked up things, and defensively he's been a great communicator. He runs the floor extremely well. And, he's going to see some minutes, especially early, and, he'll be ready when his number is called.
I remember a young freshman named Mitchell Ballack who needed about 4 or 5 set plays against Bemidji State run for him to get his shot confidence back. And by the end of that career, he was shooting from the parking lot. So I trust when you say that John's got a chance to break out of it, that he will.
But before we get off this shooting topic, because I know you keep track of everything, Max, who has shot the ball? Who has shot the ball the best, I guess, from the three and just field goals this year in practice?
Hawk has shot it really well. Arthur shot a really good percentage in practice. He hasn't shot it great against Missouri or against Upper Iowa, but I think that'll all take care of itself. Trey shot it really well. R2 has certainly shot it well above average from the 3-point line. Mason, as I mentioned, has shot it well. John is probably the one who's probably underperformed in that regard, but probably also the one that I'm least worried about. I remember back when Doug was a freshman, and I think he started the year 2 of 22 from the 3-point line.
Yeah.
And those, I remember in the staff one day, it might've been Murph, are you sure we should be allowing Doug to, shoot this many threes? And I'm like, listen, I worry about a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that keep me awake at night, but Doug's 3-point shooting is not one of them. It'll all sort itself out in the future. And of course it did, but, and I think John's the same way. He just, once he gets in a game and he sees a couple go in, I think everything will be great. But Scur, Marcus was a great shooter. Mitch was a great shooter. Denzel and DJ, good shooters. I think we have more good shooters than great shooters. But some of those, Mitch's freshman year, Mitch was not a great shooter. He was low 30s, and so was Tyshawn. And there's a process you go through from being good to great. Part of it is what are you doing outside of practice time to make sure you're trying to take yourself from good to great. And if you continue to do that and you get accustomed to the pace and you get a better understanding of where your shots are coming from, and to trust the offense and get an easier three, because, everybody, all 3-point shots aren't created equal. And, that's what I tried to explain to our team the other day, because we had a stretch against Upper Iowa where we took 3 off the dribble 3-point shots in consecutive possessions. And I talked to him about the difference, even in the NBA, the difference in points per possession and efficiency on a catch and shoot 3 versus an off the dribble 3. And it's significant with the best players in the world. So freshmen, of course, aren't going to shoot that shot as good. And that's what we're trying to make sure we're shooting the right ones. And it's a fine line I walk, because I try to, in recruiting, paint as clear a picture and as honest a picture of what I think things are going to be like. And we've sold this let it fly mantra, and that's who we want our program to be. And that involves a lot of freedom. Fortunately for us, we've had guys that have kind of understood, to Jordan's point, guys that kind of stay in their lane and understand what's a good shot for me. And as freshmen, you don't know that yet. And that's some of the things you're going to see us go through with this young group, is like, what's a good shot for Hawk might not be a good shot for Arthur quite yet. And, I've had a lot of those conversations, and again, I walk a fine line, because I don't want him to be tentative, because a tentative shooter is not going to make a shot. I want him to be aggressive. I want him to feel like, they can attack the basket and find the shot that they want to find. But I also want to make sure we're winning games and shooting the right shots.
Jordan's a big Ryan Kalkbrenner fan, so I'm going to let him ask about Kalkbrenner, but I'll ask about a little bit about Ryan Hawkins. So I'm kind of curious. That's a dude who's done a lot of winning. Now it's at a D2 level, so there's a difference, I guess, a little bit there, but there's something in the practices we've seen that all that leadership stuff just comes naturally to him. He's such a great. I even saw it this summer. We were talking about it. Remember, Jordan? I've never seen someone communicate so much defensively in summer league in my life. And I was like, if that's what he's like on a daily basis, this is a different dude. What's that been like in practice every day?
It's been a godsend. It is. I could not have, in my mind, created a fit for what this team needs as well as Ryan Hawkins has. And the basketball side of it has very little to do with that statement. It's just, he comes to practice every day, really positive attitude, is able to communicate and correct his teammates, but do it in a non-threatening, non-demeaning way, where you genuinely, when you're talking to him, know that, hey, this dude is trying to help me. And it's been awesome for our team. I love the way he communicates. He's a lot like Jahans in that regard, in that he's pretty much talking from the time we start stretching till the final huddle of practice. And that's been consistent for the 29 practices that we've had. So it's been, he's been perfect for this group. And obviously he's got a championship pedigree. He's won 3 national championships. He was the MVP of the Division II national tournament last year. So he's won at a high level, and he understands, while the level's different, what impacts winning is not different. It's not different from Division III to Division II to Division I. There's certain things that win and there's certain things that don't. And he's been able to help us as a coaching staff explain to this young team, not only with his words, but with his actions, what wins and what doesn't. And, as this group grows, and they will, and, undoubtedly, we're going to have some peaks and valleys during this season. It's just, if we don't, something's wrong. But when we look back, when this group is juniors and seniors, these guys are going to talk a lot about Ryan Hawkins. And they don't get it yet. They don't understand that totally yet. He might be that annoying old guy that's talking every day in practice right now. But when they fast forward a couple of years and they're mature enough to kind of put their arms around all this and how did we get here, they're gonna look back to the impact that he had on them at a young age.
Interesting. Yeah, we touched a little bit on Arthur Kaluma. Jordan's just chomping at the bit to ask about Krockman. I can see it. Arthur Kaluma, but like you want to play those two together, but I imagine like there's going to be some temptation to get the small ball lineup back out there because it is a bit bigger of a small ball lineup, right? You won't be as compromised from a rebounding standpoint. What does Arthur's versatility do for you creatively when you're trying to think about, hey, maybe we can, play a little bit smaller, but it still gives us a chance to be physical, in the low post and everything like that.
Yeah, we haven't done much with the small lineup yet, Matt, simply because, Kalkbrenner and Keyshawn have been so good, so sometimes you go to the small lineup because, maybe what you had there is not perfect, and you can throw a change up without a doubt. But it's, Art's pretty complete for a freshman, and most freshmen can't handle the physicality of college basketball. He can. It's not a problem. He gets downhill. He draws contact. I think he'll get to the free throw line as a result of that. And as I told Jordan, he's shot it pretty well in practice from the 3-point line, probably surprisingly well, based on what maybe my expectation was. The next step for him, and what I think that he really has is an ability to distribute. And, we've got to get him playing at the speed we're playing with and still have those skills of being able to find guys, whether it's under the basket or on the perimeter, with his vision. And when he can do that, we're going to be really, really difficult to guard, because you have to respect his 3-point shot, and you certainly have to respect his ability to drive it. But, rebounding, I don't know that we've had a rebounder like him for quite some time. I think he's got a chance to be an elite rebounder before it's all said and done.
Gotcha. Jordan, go ahead, man.
See, he
loves Kalkbrenner.
Matt gets on me because I think Ryan, I think he was just scratching the surface, and I think he is really going to develop, because this amount that I watched him last year, I was just like, he's so young. He doesn't even understand what he can become. And then again, for something you've already brought up is, Jeremy Anderson, who I credit for getting me in my senior year in the best shape of my life, man. Like Jeremy was huge for me and just how I thought I developed as a basketball player. And I know like that the work that they're probably able to do is huge. And I obviously haven't seen him in person, but from what I've seen just in games and progression, he looks great. Like he looks like he's coming along very well. So I'm interested to see, what do you think of how he's come along, and what's he going to play for you this year? What do you see his optimal role being?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start him tomorrow night, and he's earned that. He's put on 30 pounds, I think, since last year. He still looks skinny, but he's put on 30 pounds. I think we have to be careful with the expectation level we place upon him. And I think it's human nature. Like, all right, he played as a freshman and now he's a sophomore. And because we have all these young guys, then Ryan's got to go from here to here. I mean, the reality of it is big guys develop a little bit slower. It's just the way it is. And he's still a very young player. And he's had moments where he's really good. I think the one thing that he's improved immensely is his voice. Like, he has become louder on the floor. He's demanded that out of himself. And as you know, Jordan, when you have a big guy back there that's talking early and loud on ball screens, it just makes your job as a guard a lot easier to navigate all those different screens. So he's been terrific in that regard. He's been very efficient around the basket. He's worked hard to develop his perimeter jump shot, and has taken some of those in games. And I think you'll see him shoot an occasional perimeter jump shot throughout the course of the year. And then defensively, he's so good at the rim. He blocks shots, he changes shots. And then, ball screen defense, he's smart enough that we can change up coverages and he can figure all that stuff out. So he's opened up. He's pretty quiet and pretty laid back last year, and he's came out of that shell a little bit, which has been good to see. He's going to be a great player. I think he's got a chance to be an NBA player, but it's going to happen slowly. But he's a much better version of the player that played in that Sweet 16 game back in March. And I think he's going to be a much better player by the time we reach March this year. So I'm really excited about him and, love what he's doing. And he's really stepped in to a leadership role probably before he's ready to, because the situation requires it because of all the young guys on the team. He should be asking me questions where he's got a bunch of people tugging him on the shorts, asking him questions. And he's handled that with a lot of maturity.
Yeah, I think if we listen to you, none of what you just said should be surprising, because you've always told us throughout the years that, big guys develop at a slower rate than the wings and guards do. And one guy that I think kind of is exemplary of that is like an example of that is Keyshawn Fizel. Like, I think I know I've had lots of conversations with people that they look at his stats at Mississippi State and McNeese State, and they just figure, he's maybe going to play somewhat of a limited role, but he's got experience. So that's where you want him, and in depth. But he's been better than that, right? Like, he's a guy that's going to be tough to keep off the floor at times, isn't he?
No question. And, I can't remember the two guys' names, but I think he played behind two pros at Mississippi State.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think that's a big reason that he didn't play there. And then Jalen at the time, I think, was the video coordinator there. And when he went over to McNeese State, he followed him there. And, he really fought some pretty serious back issues last year at McNeese, to the point where he was, almost had kind of a Grant Gibbs type practice schedule where he'd play in a few games and practice once a week or twice a week maybe, but that's about it. And to Jordan's comment earlier about Jeremy Anderson, the combination of Ben McNair and Jeremy Anderson have really helped alleviate those problems. And I'm shocked, but he has not missed a practice yet. He's practiced all 29 practices, and you see it in him being able to do it every day and get those reps, how much better he's gotten. And, again, another guy in traffic that can go get a rebound. He's strong, he's physical. I think he'll be able to do some of the things in ball screens that you saw Christian do a year ago. It is a great compliment and change up to what Ryan is, because, Ryan's got, the 7'4" wingspan and length, but not necessarily great foot quickness. And Keyshawn has great foot quickness. So, he's probably been one of the more, if I had to pick one surprise, that would probably be the one that jumps out at me. He's a much better player than what I anticipated. And I thought we were getting a pretty good player to start with. And he's just and Matt, you've been at a few practices, so you know that this is a great group of guys, like a great group of guys. Like, they are fun to be around every day. They're connected. They really celebrate each other's success and pick each other up when they're having tough days. And, from the seat that I sit in, it's fun to sit back and watch that for such a young group. And it has really made going to practice fun every single day.
Speaking of fun guys, one of the last guy we got here, is Modestus, who I was able to play with on his visit, play open gym with. And one thing that stood out to me with him just playing then was he was explosive then, and so I think with everything he's gone through and kind of adjusting to his role and what that may be for this year, what have you kind of seen from him, and where do you see him kind of fitting into this lineup, I guess, and putting up?
Yeah, Modestus is probably has not been able to come back from the injury as quickly as Rati. In terms of, an injury like that, it's, it's part physical, but it's also part mental. And to your point, Modestus was a really good athlete, had really good bounce, really good quickness. I've started to see some of that in the last week to 10 days that I didn't see the first 4 or 5 weeks of practice. And hopefully that's a sign of things to come. And, Modestus just has to get stronger. And, he and Roddy both needed a growing learning year last year. And unfortunately they didn't get it. They weren't able to get here in the summer, and they got here and they quarantined for 3 weeks. And then somebody got COVID and they quarantined again for 10 days. And, and then they tear their ACL and they're shut down. So, he's got some work to do. but he's not afraid of the work. And, that's what's going to give him an opportunity to be productive, I think, when his number's called. So it's been a process for him. It's been hard for he and Rati, just because you just don't trust everything. And, you think back to in Scurry, I think pretty sure you were on the team when we were in the Caymans with Martine, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Coming off that ACL injury. If you think about that tournament and the year that Martine ended up having that year, we didn't even hardly use him in that tournament because he was so ineffective. And Jacob Epperson was terrific in that game against Clemson. And but then you fast forward, to January and February, and Martine gradually got back to his old self and then some. But it takes a while when you come off an injury as significant as that. And I've seen signs of Rati and Mo both going through a similar process.
Before we wrap this up a little bit, we wanted to ask you about like some identity-based questions. I'm not so we probably don't think there's going to be a whole lot different offensively, at least until you kind of see your weaknesses exposed, I guess, a little bit by some opponents. But defensively, because you guys have more length, physicality, and probably can handle the backboards a little bit better than maybe the teams you've had recently, like, what do you feel like the identity of the squad is on that end of the floor, and how have you seen them like kind of grow into that defensive system as this preseason practice has gone on?
They've done a great job, and there's still breakdowns. And, probably the breakdowns is like you have to communicate, and you have to communicate early if you're going to be a successful defensive unit. And sometimes our communication is late. Sometimes it's not loud enough. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all. And those are things that we're working through. But these guys are competing. And to your point, we have the ability to maybe erase a few mistakes because of our length, and maybe turn over a team a few times more than we normally could. And we've toyed with some different defenses. We're kind of in the early stages of those because we've had to move pretty slow because of the number of new guys we have in the team. But we have to be about what we're always be about. Like we've got to guard the ball. We got to make sure we don't give up second shots. Not giving up easy baskets in transition has always been something that's really important to me, and it will be to this team. Although last year we didn't offensive rebound very well at all, so there were times we were getting 3-4 guys back in transition against certain teams. We're going to attack the glass a little bit more with this team, and I think that can help us, maybe generate a few extra possessions per game that we're going to need. But in terms of offensively, Matt, the way we're going to play is the way we're going to play. We're going to play fast.
Yep.
We're going to make some mistakes because of it. We're going to shoot some threes, and some nights they're not going to go in, and people are going to wonder why they shoot so many threes. Well, that's who we are. That's what we do. That's where we're going with this. So we're going to have to grow through it. You're going to have to grow through some nights where you don't shoot it great. Because the last thing I want is guys that aren't confident and guys that feel like their coach doesn't believe in them. Because if that's the case, then we're not going to move forward as fast as we need to. And I think this year more than any, I think it's important for myself and my staff positivity is a word I've used a lot around our office, just because you got a bunch of young guys that are still trying to figure out their way, and they've got to know that we're on their side and that we have their back. And that can be challenging sometimes because we want results quicker. We want it to happen faster than maybe it naturally can happen. So we're gonna have to bite our tongue some. We're gonna have to let them kind of grow through some of these mistakes, but I think it'll pay dividends in the long run. I really do.
Gotcha. Jordan, you got anything?
Yeah, man. I just wanted to ask because I know we touched on it earlier, but I just think the biggest thing is, especially because last year, closed off a big year, and we touched on how there wasn't a lot of celebration behind it and what have you. But I think in transitioning to this year and you having it being such a younger team, I think one thing I've always admired is you've always embraced every year all of your teams, the identity of them, no matter what, and you embracing them as a younger team. I think what's been the most fun about this year? What have you embraced the most about having this new team kind of after the year that was last year? And I know it was challenging as it was. I know fans are back and all that with this new team. So has it been fun to just embrace that? What do you think has been the part that's gotten you going?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jordan. I've actually thought about it a lot. But I got into coaching because I like to teach. I played for some coaches in Al Marshall in high school, and then Jim Barry and Eldon Miller in college, and then worked for Rich Glass at North Dakota. And from them, I learned the value of like how the fundamentals of the game impact winning and losing so much. And if you can teach proper fundamentals and get guys to understand, how to play. And here's the why. I mean, it's one thing to tell somebody what to do. It's another thing to explain to them why it's going to help us and them be successful. And, this year, it's really forced me to, rethink my practice plans, rethink the pace of what we're working on things to make sure that I have to do what's best for my team, not necessarily what's easiest for me. And with those veteran teams, you basically can take the practice plan out from the year before, and you can, practice one from last year. You make a couple changes and flip a couple drills, but practice one this year is exactly the same. Because then I know by the time we get to the first game, I've got everything done that I need to get done because I've done it enough times. This year, I've really had to take a step back and, okay, what do we need to emphasize? We can't emphasize 30 things or we'll be average at all of them. So we practice rebounding every day. We practice verticality every day. We've guarded the ball one-on-one every day. We've done passing drills where we're communicating one more every single day. And, hopefully some of those skills then start to become ingrained into our guys. And to me, having to think about that and think about, all right, how are we going to mold this young team with not a lot of veteran leadership to help us? And, it's about us as coaches taking on some of that role ourselves, but also coaching guys that maybe isn't quite their time to be a leader, but we have to help them become a leader, whether they're ready or not, because their teammates need them. As you know, Jordan, there's certain things that are more impactful. The same thing said from a teammate could be said from a coach, and coming from a teammate, it just hits you totally different. And if you don't have those guys, then that leaves a huge void in my mind. So we've been coaching our leaders as well this year and getting them ready for what we think this team needs. And that's been enjoyable for me. It's been fun for me. And I think if this team continues down the path that they've started the first 30 days, they're going to be a team in 7 or 8 years that we're going to be talking about, like the teams we talked about earlier tonight. They have a chance to be that special. So I'm really excited about it. It's been a lot of fun, and now it's time to, play the games. And it's going to be great to go in that arena tomorrow night and see all the fans there and, engage with fans once again. See the DJ's dugout and Addie's and the Hilton bar and the Marriott bar. They're all full when I drive past to go to the game, and it's all blue. And that's something that's a void that's been missing for the last year or so. And I can't wait to have it back.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to mention, like, this is like, it's business time tomorrow. And I understand like wins and losses are going to keep you up at night, and all those film sessions, you're not going to get much sleep over the next few months. But I do hope you're able to do something that coaches just don't do. And that's just like, take a minute to look around that arena. Cause I know it happened with volleyball when you heard the first roar, like that first moment that just happened organically where the crowd just like sprung to react to something that happened. Like, that's going to mean something tomorrow because of the year that we just went through and not having that to a degree. So hopefully you're able to at least not think about the ball screen covers that just got blown up right there and just like kind of appreciate being around the 18,000 again.
Yeah. And I almost feel guilty that, that there was one fiber in my body that probably started to take fans for granted because we've been so blessed at Creighton. And in this community, the way they've supported us in good times and in bad. We've had championship teams, and we had a team 7 years ago that really struggled to get off to a good start in the Big East, and we come home to game against Butler when we're 0-8 in the Big East and we have 18,000 people there. And, our fans are special. And until last year, you don't realize how special it is, because playing in that building without fans we weren't very good at home at times. And it's because they were missing, it's such a big part of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And our identity is our crowd. And I look forward to having them back, and we're going to need them to be crazy this year. This young group's they're going to need to stand on the shoulders of our crowd at times when we're struggling. And I'm confident that our crowd it's a very educated basketball crowd, as you know, and we're going to really need them this season, especially in the early going, as we, try to figure some things out. And these guys try to get some of the jitters. You can imagine how they're feeling tonight. Probably not a lot of sleep taking place for those young guys tonight, as they are anticipating what's going to happen at 7:00 tomorrow night.
Jordan and I, by the way, are big fans of the quarter zip and khakis look. So love
Huge
it.
Fans.
Love the new uniform look for the coaching
Well,
staff. Thanks for being a trend center.
Can you believe at Big East Media Day that those other 10 coaches dressed it inappropriately?
Seriously.
I
know.
I saw what they were wearing. I was like, oh, they must have not got Mac's memo.
That's right. Yeah. What's going on? I mean, everybody. Yeah. So, I mean, I asked the question when we discussed it. We discussed it on one of our Zoom calls about what we're going to wear this year. And I think we finally decided, I think somebody said it, maybe Barry Collier of Butler said, we don't want to get in the business of telling coaches what to wear.
Mm-hmm.
You can wear whatever you want to wear. And I think last year we found out how comfortable it was and how easy it was.
Seriously.
And, we're putting our arms around guys that are in full sweat, like, why do we need to wear these expensive suits to do that?
Yeah.
So I asked the question, what about media day? And I remember Val Ackerman asked John Paquette, John, what's the media think for media day? And John says, Fox has no preference on whether you're casual or in a suit. Well, that's all I needed to hear, Scur. That was it.
I like that. No, I like it. I'm with it, because I do like that's what you should. You're a basketball coach at a game, like with that whole arm around the players thing. I always felt, hey, it makes sense. You look more comfortable.
The next
I'm rocking with it. I'm with it. I'm behind you 100%.
Someday you'll see me in a suit and a casket. That's fine.
Oh no, I don't want that one. I don't want that.
If I can have my way, that'll be the next time I wear one of those. So the casual look has been great, and as you can imagine, Johnny McHugh's come up with some pretty good outfits for the boys, so it'll be fun. Yeah,
McHugh always gets the fits right, for sure. Well, hey man, we appreciate your time. We know you're a busy guy, especially right now with everything getting ready to tip off. So we appreciate your time coming on and breaking down the roster for us. We did want to give a birthday shout out to Mama Scur, because without her, literally this podcast is impossible.
Absolutely. So. I was texting her. I sent her a message early this morning. She texted me back this afternoon. We were going back and forth, and I told her I was jumping on with Jordan here in a little bit and was looking forward to catching up. So happy to hear that she's doing well and her health is good. And as you know, Jordan we've battled cancer in our family as well. You're blessed. That some of the things that an event like the Pink Out and Coaches versus Cancer events across the country that are raising money to fight this disease and to try to find a cure and try to improve treatments and figure out a way to be better at early detection. It's the reason that your mom's alive and my wife's alive. So we can't stop the fight. That's an important fight, and we've got to stick with it. But I was thrilled today to hear that Maria's doing great, and I echo Matt's comments on wishing her a very happy birthday.
Yeah, she's still thrilled to get the birthday text from Coach Mack, especially a day before the first game of the season. She was like, he's got a game tomorrow, and he still texts me. I'm like, of course he did, Mom. You know he is. And
that's right.
Yeah, no, we always appreciate it. So happy for just her health and everything we've been able to get through this past year and all that. So excited to get to tomorrow, to the fun of it, to Blue Jay basketball. Happy to have you on here. Appreciate your time tonight.
Sure.
Always good to catch up.
Yeah, anytime. And you remember, Scur, like, you're a member of the media now, so you have a lot of ideas of what we should have done after the game. Like, if you've got ideas, I want them before the game. Like, after the game, I know what the hell went wrong. I don't need to hear from you what went wrong. I need that advice before the game, right? So
I got you. I'm never really the after the game. I'm more just Matt's the critical one. I call it like it is.
We
I
play
just
our
call
roles.
it like I see it. Yeah.
No, you guys are the
team.
best. We appreciate the relationship that we have, and look forward to a great season.
Sounds good. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Want to thank Greg McDermott for being generous with his time. For Jordan, I'm Matt. This has been your Scurry of the Scrub.